What's going on, college football fans? We are continuing our drive towards the 2024 college football season, and we're so glad that you're in the passenger seat alongside us. We're making our way through pretty much anybody that Mason and I feel like could have an impact on the college football playoff this season. Welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. I'm your co-host, Marcus. There's your other co-host, Mason. Mason, how are you today, man?
Man, doing good. Ready to talk some Badger football. Year two under Luke Fickell. I think if you're a Badgers fan, you probably feel pretty good about where the football team sits heading into year two under Luke Fickell. There was a lot of adjustments going on last year. Totally new offense, totally new defense, and I think you saw as the year went on a team that got better. It's pretty hard to argue that. I mean, this is a team that was within a score in the bowl game against LSU, and I think that they got better overall. And now heading into year two, this is really the bump year for a lot of teams. Any team going under a coaching change, we see a year two bump. And I don't think that Wisconsin is going to be any different. I'm excited for what this program brings to the table, and what they return. I think they got a lot of returning talent, and I'm excited to break it down with you to see kind of what you came up with as you were breaking down this team.
A lot of returning talent, a lot of guys moving around through transfer portal. I feel like Wisconsin has done a fantastic job answering the bell. For things that needed to be, holes that needed to be filled in this offense and defense. I think this is a team that is expecting big returns in year two of a lot of these coaches, and we'll kind of jump into it. But this is going to be year two of Luke Fickell. And look, this guy did everything you could ask of a coach to claw his way up to this big boy job that he's got right now. Everybody knows what he did while he was at Cincinnati, 11-2 record in 2018. And that was his second season leading the Bearcats. So I think a lot of people are drawing a line between Luke Fickell and his, second year success at Cincinnati and his, what his ceiling could be in his second year as the coach of Wisconsin. We've got several coaches though on this coaching staff that are back for a second year, and one of them, definitely a very important character on this coaching staff, Phil Longo, who is a 34-year coaching veteran, and I think people take it for granted what having 36 years of experience can do for a team that is transitioning. I mean, let's just be honest. That's what this Wisconsin team has done over the last couple of years. It's really made a transition. Trying to get back to being a power in their own conference. The air raid is something that Phil Longo has been associated with. His name has been associated with over the last few years, obviously. And Wisconsin, I feel like, took a step closer to being more evolved on offense last year. And I think second year under Phil Longo is going to be that much better. What do you think about this offense? Headed into 2024. Definitely an area of deficiency last year as everybody was trying to kind of figure out what their role is in this offense and give this coaching staff a chance to get the guys in there that fit the scheme. What do you think about Phil Longo and his second year and Luke Fickell's second year at Wisconsin?
Yeah, I think that really Phil Longo was playing with a team that didn't quite fit what he wanted to do last year. Had an outstanding running back really in Braylon Allen, but was he really the right back for this offense? Probably not. So for him to be your feature player on offense, I think probably did the offense a little bit of a disservice. And I'm really not trying to bash Allen in any way. I just don't think that he fit Phil Longo's offensive system. He fit the prior regime's offensive system. So now, you've got Ches Malusi, who is probably a better fit for this offense if he can stay healthy. He's a guy who's battled injury a lot.
Yeah.
So I think if he's healthy, he could be a feature player in this offense. And then, of course, the quarterback being brought in, Tyler Van Dyke, in a little bit of a quarterback competition, some would say, with Braden Locke, but ultimately you've got a guy with a lot of experience who knows football, and I think that he's going to be relied on heavily to be the signal caller here for this offense and run the air raid system with a lot of success, hopefully with Phil Longo.
Yeah, and speaking about those quarterbacks, Mason, Tyler Van Dyke, as you said, coming in from Miami. Um, a lot of people will say, well, there's a reason he came to Wisconsin, and we saw what Braden Locke could do. And not to say that he can't evolve, because we've seen quarterbacks get better. I mean, let's talk about Stetson Bennett, for example. I'm a Georgia fan. Mason's a Georgia fan. This guy sucked at first, okay, and then he ended up being one of the most highly decorated college football players to ever play the game. So can Braden Locke get better? Hell yeah, he can get better. There's no doubt about it. But I think that the ceiling is just higher with Tyler Van Dyke at this point. But which Tyler Van Dyke are we getting? This is one of the most just black and white quarterbacks I've ever seen. He's either got it or he don't, man. It's either he got it or he don't. And he's got to figure out a way to raise the floor, right? And realize that, he has the potential to make all the throws, but it doesn't mean that he needs to try to make all the throws, right? Tyler Van Dimes, he's trademarked all this stuff. I'm just curious what quarterback is going to show up for Wisconsin. I don't think we're going to fully know that, obviously until the season gets started, but all in all, I think that Tyler Van Dyke is coming over to an offense that is going to be a lot of fun, Mason. We're going to talk about the receivers here in just a minute. Some really good receivers. If you had your pick at these two quarterbacks, knowing what we know about these guys, it sounds like you're leaning towards Tyler Van Dyke as well. What's your take on that? I feel like there's a decent. I mean, you at least got a backup with some experience, though. With Braden Locke and a guy that's got talent, and I think that you can work with him. But I think Van Dyke is the best answer for the Wisconsin Badgers this year.
Yeah, I mean, we could see a sort of a fluid situation at quarterback. I think you've got to give Tyler Van Dyke the week one, starter role, and maybe this is a situation where Braden Locke gets better, improves, and really shows that in practice throughout the season. And you could see a case where TVD goes down with an injury. Braden Locke just doesn't give up the starting role. All right, we've seen that time and time again in college football. But ultimately, if I were a Wisconsin fan, I'm focused primarily on Tyler Van Dyke as my week one starter, and I'm hoping, like you mentioned, that he is going to come out and play to his ceiling, to the player that we saw, a freshman all ACC player, with Miami initially, and if you get that in a senior, I think this could be a pretty dangerous offense overall. Look, this, as good as these receivers are, this isn't Ohio State's receiver room, right? And he's going to have to make some plays. The issues that I've seen with Tyler Van Dyke is his decision making, and not so much that he's making the wrong decisions, it's how fast he's processing the right decision. He's a little bit late on his timing, getting the ball out and getting it to those receivers. So if your receivers aren't creating a ton of separation, that can be an issue. He kind of has to become Tyler Van Dimes if he's making a late read on the defense, and he's got to put it in the right spot. If he's making the right read, he should be able to kind of lead his receivers into some open space a little bit better. And hey, maybe this is the year he puts it all together. It wouldn't be the craziest thing we've ever seen. But ultimately, I'm looking at Tyler Van Dyke as the starter to start the season, and hoping that he continues to show some progression.
Yeah. 2,703 yards, 19 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 65% completion percentage for Tyler Van Dyke last year. Braden Locke, exactly 50% completion, 777 yards, 5 TDs, and 1 interception, and that was in 5 games. So definitely got a nice little sample size of Braden Locke and got him some good experience. And you never know; it could come in handy this year. Yeah, because a quarterback can go out after one play. We all know that. Let's just kind of look at some of the returning production that we've got, and we've got a lot of the numbers over there, left side of that slide there. But you talked about it earlier, Ches Malusi. I think this is the guy that Wisconsin really feels needs to be their number one go-to guy running the ball out of the backfield. Can he stay healthy? That's obviously the biggest question there. 306 yards last year. That was good for 17% of production in the running back room. You see Braylon Allen.
That was only in 4 weeks too. I mean, he was out at week 4. He's close to 100 yards a game there. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. Braylon Allen, as you said, moving on to the NFL, accounted for 55% of the rushing yards for that running back room last year. That's a lot of carries and a lot of situational downs that are going to be doled out to guys like Ches Malusi as long as he is healthy. You've got Jackson Acker coming back, and you've got a transfer coming in. We're going to look at some of the transfers coming in here in just a second, but you've got Tawee Walker, and a lot of the Wisconsin guys that I've listened to, on YouTube and things like that, are really, really, really high on this guy. And then I've got tons of people that I listen to saying, hey, don't forget about these freshmen. We've got some freshmen that are coming in that are absolutely special. And, I think that there's something to be said for that, because I believe that a freshman can step in as a running back and be productive. Now, in this system, there's going to be, a lot of the running backs picking up blitzes and things like that with this air raid system. So I think that makes it a little tougher for these 17 and 18-year-old guys to come out and jump into a system. But nonetheless, I think you've got some purely talented runners coming in that freshman class to go alongside these guys that you're hoping stay healthy. What do you think about the running back room? I think they're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. Ches Malusi, I think, is your starter. I think Tawee Walker is probably your number 2. And really, I don't outside of that, 3, 4, and 5, I think you're going to see some rotation. But ultimately, I think it's a two-headed monster. And I think you've got two really good running backs here for a Wisconsin group that's, and we'll get to offensive line in a minute. But I think this is going to be a pretty good offensive line for the Badgers.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's kind of look before we go to the next slide. I just wanted to look at some of the receiving yards that are returning now before we transition over to wide receivers, and because we had spoke on these wide receivers just a few minutes ago, but Will Paulding, Bryson Green, both guys coming back. Had a couple of transfers out for a couple of guys there on your list. CJ Williams coming back. Joseph Griffin comes in from Boston College. He's got 25. He had 25 receptions, 345 yards, and a touchdown last year. As far as Wisconsin is concerned, I feel like this is one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver group that they've had on campus together in at least 10 or 15 years. This is a very solid group, and it's just in time for the second year of an air raid offense. I think you're going to see some of these guys really, really blow up. And Will Paulding had 837 yards in this offense last year. We're talking about a guy who's very possibly could have over 1,000 yards receiving this year if he's lucky enough to stay healthy. I think this is some serious returning talent here at the wide receiver position that's going to be very, very handy. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And, you've got a lot of depth here to play with, which is so important to have, a lot of different types of receivers, a lot of different archetypes. But the number one player that I'm looking at to be sort of maybe a Big Ten household name is Trek. I can't pronounce his name, but Trek Kekahuna, wide receiver out of Hawaii. He got some playing time late. Most of his playing time came in that bowl game against LSU, and the guy went for I think it was 4 catches and 64 yards, but looked like he's got a lot of big play potential. So I'm looking at him behind Paulding. Whenever Paulding comes out, takes a breather, for him to step in there and get some pretty good playing time there. He's got that big play potential, and I could see him dishing out a 400 or 500 yard season with 6 or 7 touchdowns. That type of player that's just going to take the top off of a defense. So he's a guy that I'm circling, and I'm anxious to see what he produces this year.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm anxious to see who's really going to give this offense that big time over the top threat. Like I said, I feel good about Will Pauling. I feel like you need a 1-2 punch there, and I'm interested to see who's going to step up and be the downfield threat for this team for Tyler Van Dimes to chunk some dimes down the field at. Offensive transfer additions. This is something that we have to talk about with every single team. I guess maybe except Clemson, right? We have to talk about transfer additions and subtractions, and for the point of this show, we'll just stick to the additions. But we already spoke about Tawi Walker. That guy is going to contribute on this team, and everybody's really, really, really high on that guy. So I expect big things. Joseph Griffin, I talked about a minute ago, coming over from Boston College. This is a guy that really came on last year, and I think is going to be a big help. And Leighton Nelson, we haven't got to the offensive line yet, but that's a guy that is coming onto the roster and is going to be, I think, part of a pretty daggone good room as far as the offensive line is concerned. And, for whatever reason, I did not make a slide for the offensive line, so we can talk about that just for a second. You bring in guys like Leighton Nelson, Joey Okla. You talked about it a minute ago. You felt like this offensive line is going to be able to take a step in the right direction this year. When I grew up, man, Wisconsin offensive lines you just knew what you were going to get week in and week out. I mean, It was just those big corn-fed Midwestern boys pushing folks around. It seems kind of funny to sit here and talk about Wisconsin and an air raid system, but the offensive line, in my opinion, should take a big, big step in the right direction this year. What are your thoughts on the line, and are we going to see some improvement there this year?
Yeah, I think the biggest question mark for me is going to be at the center position. They're replacing center and right guard, but ultimately the center, especially in an air raid system, is going to be the catalyst for this offensive line unit. So I think that they've really got a hit at center with Jake Renfro. He did play in the bowl game last year, and by all accounts, did a pretty good job. But I'm anxious to see what he does as the full-time starter. Ultimately, though, I think they're returning a lot of production. I think they've got pretty good depth for the most part for the offensive line. They've probably got about 7 guys that they could run in and out. Is it the strength of the offense? I don't know if I would go that far to say that, but I think this is a pretty solid unit that should be able to get the job done and create some holes for Walker and Malusi.
Yep. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. I've felt like this was somewhat of a strength for this team last year, right? I thought it was solid. You had some really, really good players out there on this team. Safety Hunter Waller is somebody that you're going to hear his name just a ton. 120 tackles last year. That was the most for a Badger DB since 1991. Absolutely incredible. But Mike Tressel, I almost called him Jim Tressel. Mike Tressel, you can see his numbers there at the bottom of your screen from 21 and 22 as the defensive coordinator for Cincinnati. I mean, first in just about everything, right? First in everything in their conference and top 15, 20 in every other category nationwide. So I think this is a guy that knows what he's doing, obviously. The defense wasn't bad last year. I think it's only going to improve if this defensive line can prove to be serviceable as they think that it is. Let's kind of jump into some of the defensive returners. We already spoke about Hunter Waller and his 1 million tackles he made last year. You bring back a linebacker in Jake Chaney that made up for almost 10% of the tackles for the whole team last year in his own right. So you've got some sure tacklers out there throughout the linebacker core, throughout the secondary. I think the biggest thing for this team is going to be production among the defensive linemen. And look, I think that's the story for a ton of college football teams, Mason, this year. It's every year. It's not just this year, but defensive line is going to make or break several teams that feel like they should be contenders in their own conferences. And as this defensive line goes, this defense is going to go this year. And you're going to be going against some great offensive lines. We'll look at the schedule here in just a minute. What do you think overall about this defense? You bring back guys like we said, Chaney, Waller, Daryl Peterson. Those are some really, really nice pieces, and not to mention going to be adding some pieces through the portal and recruiting. What's your thoughts on the defense this year?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that Tressel had at his disposal at Cincinnati was a really strong defensive backs group in his last 2 years at least. And I think that's what you've got here with Wisconsin. Once again, I mean, you've got you mentioned Wohler at strong safety. You've got Hallman, who led college football with 7 interceptions last year at left cornerback, and at right cornerback is your true lockdown with Forkreen. And I think you really, with those 3 pieces alone, have a really strong defensive backfield, which is going to be so important when you talk about the lack of depth on the defensive line. Now, the good thing about this system is, they run a 2-4-5, so they're kind of masking the lack of talent that they have up front by only going 2 down linemen. Essentially, you've got 2 outside linebackers as well, but they're long and quick on the outside. And I think that middle linebacker group as a whole, that linebacker group as a whole, excuse me, and with strong middle linebackers as well, is going to mask a lot of the challenges that the defensive line is going to see, and hopefully free up a little bit of time for those DBs to get set and make a play. So.
Yeah.
So, ultimately, I agree with you. The defensive line unit is the weakest of the defense, but I think that the scheme that they run is going to mask some of those ineptitudes. And in year 2, especially when they were running a 3-3-5, now they're going to go to this 2-4-5. I think the unit as a whole should show some more cohesion, and ultimately this defensive backfield is pretty freaking elite, and I'm excited to watch what Tressel does with the pieces that he has, because I think that they have a couple of NFL type players on that back end, and I think that's going to make a difference this year.
And they've got some awesome transfers coming in, Mason. This guy, John Pius Jr., he is an outside linebacker that came over from William and Mary. So this isn't a guy that you're all sitting in your living rooms talking about every Saturday, but 40 and a half career tackles for loss, 24 and a half sacks. I mean, you can't duplicate what that type of experience can do for a college football player. I mean, there is nothing that you can replace that experience with that is going to give you any better of an upper hand on Saturday than having snaps and having been through the college football process in general. John Pius Jr. is going to be a big help. Leon Lowry, Leighton Nelson. Excuse me, that's not Leighton Nelson. That is I messed up and didn't change the name for him, but that is the linebacker from Arkansas, Jaheim Thomas, there pictured on the right. 90 tackles, 39 of those solo, 3.5 sacks. So I'm seeing, just like you're saying, Mason, I'm seeing an extremely strong linebacker room. And maybe you're right. Maybe this is the process in which they're going to, kind of pass the fact that this isn't an elite defensive line room, because it doesn't have to be necessarily in this scheme, or so Wisconsin feels that way. We are going to see as the season progresses. Let's kind of jump into the schedule, man. You want to take us through this schedule and kind of give us your thoughts, and starting off those first couple of games pretty easy, and then you've got Alabama. Going to be a pretty tough game, but you do get that third game against the Crimson Tide at home. That is going to be a sold-out crowd, obviously, a raucous environment there on September 14th. I know I will be tuned in for that bad boy. Take us through this. Tell us, kind of what your thoughts are. And we always like to talk about trap games and things like that, and then we'll kind of get into what we are predicting for each of our predictions for this Wisconsin team. And anybody who's watching, I certainly do appreciate you, Wisconsin fans. Hit the subscribe button. Come hang out with us. We're going to be talking Big Ten football, Wisconsin football, all the Power Four college football teams and conferences all season long. We're just getting ready for the season. We're breaking down all the awesome teams that are going to be in playoff contention this year. We're breaking down about 40 teams. And then once the season gets started, we're going to be going live every week, and we'd love for you to join us and have your awesome Big Ten Wisconsin knowledgeable commentary in the comment section. So you tell us what you think Wisconsin's going to do with this schedule this year. Mason, break it down for us. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. Those first 2 weeks, you get a chance to set your feet, build the confidence up a little bit, and then you're going to get hit in the mouth with Alabama in week 3. You mentioned that game is at home, and then you do take a bye after that, which I think is going to be much needed. Then you got to go to the West Coast and play USC. Not a bad team to be playing on the West Coast. I think USC is going to be rebuilding in a sense themselves with their defense and a new defensive coordinator. They've got to figure out a ton on defense. So they will be using this as a game to kind of get better for them as well. But then you got Purdue, which if you watch one of our past breakdowns, we did do a Purdue breakdown, and Purdue's going to be a pretty stinking good team. Rutgers is not going to be any pushover with Shiano out there. I think he's doing a great job. Northwestern should be a W. Penn State, you do get at home. Still going to be pretty tough. I think Penn State's kind of on this, kind of self-manifested revenge tour in a way. I don't know who they're feeling vengeful against, but ultimately it seems like it seems like they're in a make or break state in a way. So that will be a tough game in October. Then heading into November, you got a tough defense with Iowa, and you got to go play at Iowa. Not doing any favors there with the schedule. So then you've got Oregon at home. Again, your third toughest, not in any particular order, but all 3 of your toughest opponents you do get at home. So maybe a little bit of a favor there by the schedule makers. Nebraska on the road, that's going to be a really fun game. That's one to circle, folks, because Nebraska is also in year 2 under their coach. And I feel like these two teams have like a new age rivalry in a sense, in the Big Ten, and given the pedigree of their coaches who have come in, what they've been able to do with their programs. I don't know that there could be a team in the Big Ten that mirrors what Wisconsin is any better than what Nebraska can. So that's as far as parity goes, I think that's a very even matchup there with Nebraska. And then you get Minnesota at home. That's a game you should win, but Minnesota's a pretty pesky team, so you can't sleep on that one at the end of the season there. So ultimately, I'm looking at this. I've got their win over under win total at 7.5 personally for me. Tabulating all this, I do think that Alabama will be a loss. I've got USC as a 50-50 game, and I've got Penn State as a loss. I've got Oregon as a loss. Iowa and Nebraska I've got as 50-50 games, and I think that they should win the rest of the games. So ultimately, I've got them at 7.5 wins total. That's 1 win higher than what Vegas has them at 6.5. So I'm feeling a little bit bullish on Wisconsin. I do think that would be a safe bet if anyone wants to put some money on it. I think that 6.5 is just a little bit too low for a team that's trending in the right direction in year 2 under Luke Fickell.
I think you're correct on that, Mason. I think that just looking at this, I'll take it the first 6 games. Let's kind of go through those. You got a dub and a dub your first couple of games. I think that is a loss against Alabama, although, that may be a close game. That may end up being a good one. I feel like Alabama is going to want to run the football. I feel like that's going to be their recipe for success. I think they're going to be very good at it. I don't think this is going to be nearly as good of an Alabama defense this year as what we've seen even last year or years in the past. So if you could somehow win that game, I think that could put you up towards like 9 wins for the season if you could somehow sneak a victory there. I think USC is. I think that's a victory for Wisconsin. I think Purdue's a victory. I think Rutgers is a victory. So I'm thinking 5-1 through those first 6 games. But Mason, here is here's a look ahead game to start off that bottom row of games. And look, Northwestern, nobody's talking about little old Northwestern, and I understand why, because it is Northwestern after all. But after the Wiener car wash that they went through last year, all the the helicopter in their wieners around and making people walk around and look at them and stuff, dude, they went like 7-5 or whatever. Okay, it was not something that we're all sitting at home saying, "Wow, them damn Northwestern boys, are going to win the Big Ten." I mean, nobody's saying that, but you go there on October 19th. Their stadium is under renovation. They're playing literally on the banks of the Great Lakes. The wind is going to be 20 miles an hour minimum. It's going to be 40 degrees or lower. It's going to be disgusting. It's going to be absolutely disgusting. It's going to be a tough game for Wisconsin there. I just kind of throw that one out there because you've got the Penn State game, the 26th, that these guys are obviously going to be looking forward to. Wisconsin's got that Penn State. Penn State is a team that Wisconsin needs to beat this year. And I'm not sure that they can do it, but nonetheless, I think it's a loss to Penn State. I think it's a loss to Iowa. I think it's a loss to Oregon, and I think they can win those last couple of games. So I could see this team going 8-4, and that's going to be my prediction for this season, with losses to Iowa, Penn State, Oregon, and Alabama this season. And like I said, if you can snatch one of those games, you're talking about a 9-win team, brother. And who knows where that's going to put you in the rankings, and especially whenever you're in the Big Ten. You lose 3 games in the Big Ten or the SEC from here on out, you are going to be in playoff talks. I don't know that you're going to be in the top 12, but depending on who you lose to, it's very possible. I mean, think about it. If Wisconsin lost to Alabama, Penn State, and Oregon, it's possible that Alabama, Penn State, and Oregon are in playoff conversations, and you just lost to 3 teams that are possibly going to the playoff. So, you never know. You just never know. I think this is a upticking team. This is a team that is trending in the right direction. I'm a huge fan of Luke Fickell, and I believe that he's got what it takes to be successful in Wisconsin. Super, super happy for the all the Wisconsin fans who I'm sure were getting sick of not having a winning football program, and I think you got the right guy to turn that program around and really get things going in the right direction. Again, if you're a Wisconsin fan, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and most of all, hit that comment section and tell us what you think about your Badgers this year. We'd love to hear your input. We learned a lot from you guys. Thank you all so much for watching, and have a great day.